Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a knight or a queen or a poet with a quill full of destiny. No, you're a physician in the court of Henry VIII, which is rather like being a candle in a plague ward. Useful, short-lived, and likely to catch fire. You've studied anatomy in crumbling Latin texts. You've memorised the humours, whispered over urine pots, and packed more ulcers than you care to count. And now, the king has summoned you. Congratulations, you're about to meet the most powerful man in England. He's sweating through ermine, leaking from the leg, and prone to beheading anyone who makes him feel mortal. You'll be fine, probably. Before you lay out your poultices and polish your best brass leech bowl, do me one small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these little nightmares travel. If you'd like early access to more softly haunting bedtime tales like this one, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You were always clever. Not brilliant, that's for poets and martyrs, but clever enough to avoid both. You memorised Galen by candlelight, practised your Latin until it no longer sounded like prayer. You bled nobles and monks with equal care, always knowing just how much pain they could tolerate before they stopped calling you doctor and started calling you butcher. You learned the four humours, the signs of imbalance, and the subtle art of pretending your treatments were working. You had a talent for timing, a gift for booing, and when the old surgeon at court fell from favour, or down a staircase, depending on who you ask, you were standing in just the right place, with just the right tone of voice to be noticed. You've read a little at Padua, or at least convinced people you did. You've treated a baron's kidney stone and the Bishop of Bath's inconvenient boils. You keep your instruments clean, your beard trimmed, and your opinions moderate. You carry leeches in a fine velvet pouch, and you know how to smile without revealing the dread behind your eyes. You know better than to call anything a cure. Better to say progress, stabilisation, divine alignment of the humours. When you say these things, people nod. Not because they understand, but because they want to believe you do. You've reached the age where most men stop striving and start securing. A chamber at court, a tidy annuity, a patron who likes to drink too much and bleed just enough to sleep afterward. You thought you'd made it, and for a time, you had. The royal court was a place of whispers and perfume and rot beneath velvet, but you navigated it well enough. You kept your ears open and your mouth shut. You didn't look too long at anyone's mistress. You didn't offer advice unless asked, and even then, you offered it as if you were reluctantly recalling someone else's opinion. You stayed invisible in all the right ways. Then came the summons. A scroll borne by a trembling boy in fine livery. The wax seal was fresh, heavy, crimson as a clot. He didn't meet your eyes as he handed it over. No one ever does when the message comes from him. You broke the seal with a blade you suddenly realised was shaking. The words were brief, formal, unmistakable. His Majesty, Henry, 8th of his name, Defender of the Faith, Supreme Head of the Church of England, required your presence in his privy chamber at Westminster. You were to attend to the royal person at once. You were to bring your instruments. You were to speak of this to no one. You read it twice, then a third time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something less terminal. They did not. This is supposed to be an honour. That's what they'll say. The other physicians, the ones not summoned, will clap you on the back and wish you well in tones too cheerful to be sincere. Your apprentices will stare with open mouths and wide eyes, already imagining their own futures being rewritten in the margins of yours. Your steward will polish your shoes and lay out your best coat, as if you were heading to a wedding. But you know better. You've heard the stories everyone has, the king's leg. That's how they refer to it, when they speak of it at all. Not a wound, not an ulcer, a presence, a condition. It has a room of its own in the minds of the court. It has moods. It has rumours. It has a smell. Some say it's cursed. Others claim it's proof of divine trial, that only a sovereign chosen by God could survive a wound so vile for so long. The less poetic ones say it's rot. Old jousting wound, poorly drained, infected, and reinfected until the flesh itself has given up. No one agrees on the details, but all agree on this. It never heals. It never gets better. And those who fail to improve it tend to vanish. You tell yourself that you're different, that you've read things the others haven't, that you have your own ideas, your own careful theories. You've seen what too much bile can do to a body. You've watched fever twist men into corpses. You believe you can manage this. You have leeches. You have lavender spirits. You have prayers memorised in 2 languages and a poultice that worked once on a duchess with a septic toe. Surely something in your kit will be enough. It has to be, because if it isn't, well, the last man was said to have left court quietly. But no one remembers his name, or at least no one is willing to say it aloud. So you dress in silence, pack your satchel, choose your sharpest blades and your dullest herbs. You leave behind the window open, the fire low, and the supper half eaten. You are not hungry now. You step into the waiting carriage without a word. The door closes behind you like a vault. You're going to see the king. You are not ready. The palace looms like something halfway between a cathedral and a mausoleum, a place where power lingers in the air like mildew. You step through the gates with your head low, your breath steady, your satchel clutched a little too tightly. The stone beneath your boots is wet from a morning drizzle, slick enough to remind you how many men have slipped here, figuratively and otherwise. The guards at the entrance eye you without warmth. They don't speak. They don't need to. Their silence is the kind that's been honed over years of watching important people walk in and failures carried out. Inside, the air thickens. The stone walls sweat with age. The scent is layered. Roasting meat wafts from the kitchens, heavy and greasy, clinging to your tongue. Beneath that, damp rushes, old smoke, and something sweeter, rotting at the edges. Incense burns somewhere nearby, not because it's holy, but because it's necessary. Even sanctified decay needs a disguise. A servant hurries past you with a silver basin, and you catch a whiff of what might be lavender, or vinegar. It's hard to tell. Everything smells like something it shouldn't. A steward in a wine-coloured doublet greets you with the hollow formality of a man who's memorised his welcome speech and long since stopped listening to it. He doesn't ask your name. He knows it already. He tells you how to walk, not too fast, not too slow, and how to bow. You're reminded that His Majesty prefers his title spoken in full on first address, that you are not to comment on His Majesty's appearance, gait, or temperament, that the king has been feeling vigorous today, which you're told is a good sign. You are not convinced. The halls are alive with whispers. Courtiers drift past like silk-draped shadows, murmuring just loud enough to be overheard, but never loud enough to be held accountable. Their faces are powdered, their smiles thin and knowing. They glance at you as if measuring your weight for a future anecdote. You see one man, broad-shouldered, narrow-eyed, lean toward a companion and mutter something behind a bejewelled hand. They both smirk. You know better than to react. Everything here is a test and no one tells you when it begins. A pair of dogs trots down the corridor ahead of you, their ears clipped, their eyes too alert. One sniffs the hem of your coat, then loses interest. You take this as a blessing. The steward leads you through 3 chambers, each more gilded than the last. Tapestries hang like aging skins on the walls, battles, saints, lions rampant and crucified martyrs. None of it feels triumphant. It's too quiet for that. This is not a place for celebration. This is a place for survival. You pass a set of heavy doors flanked by guards in green and gold livery. They don't move. Their eyes track you like hawks. You do not meet them. The steward gestures subtly, and you keep moving. Behind one curtain you hear laughter, high, false, the kind that ends too quickly. Someone is being entertained, or humiliated. Here, it's often the same thing. You're stopped at a wide chamber with a painted ceiling and 4 women seated in near silence. One looks up and offers the ghost of a smile. It might be the Queen, Catherine Howard, if rumour is accurate. She's younger than you expected, with skin too pale for the season, and eyes that flick from you to the steward, then back again. She says nothing. Neither do you. Her presence alone is enough to remind you that the king is not the only danger here. The wives of Henry VIII have a survival rate just above that of small birds during a hawk migration. The steward tells you the king is in his privy chamber and that you will be announced shortly. You are not to speak unless addressed. You are not to correct the king. You are not to flinch no matter what you see. These instructions are delivered with the same calm tone one might use to describe the contents of a fruit basket, but you hear what he means. This is not medicine. This is performance. You are not here to heal. You are here to appease something immense, unpredictable, and already rotting from the inside out. The final hallway is lined with portraits, previous kings, crusaders, saints with their eyes rolled heavenward. You look at none of them. Your heart thuds once in your chest, like a warning bell. At the end of the corridor, a final pair of guards stands motionless, halberds in hand. One of them opens the door. The steward nods once sharply. You step forward. The chamber beyond smells of musk, damp wool, and old pain. You can hear the faint hiss of a fire, the creak of leather, and something else beneath it, a slow rhythmic sound, wet and irregular. He is not what the portraits promise. The first thing you notice is the bulk. Not regal or muscular or mighty in the heroic sense, not the kind that inspires coins or equestrian statues, but the kind that creaks beneath its own weight. He sits in an ornate chair that may once have been a throne, but now functions more as reinforced furniture. His robes spill over the sides like gravy over meat. His face is round and ruddy, glistening with the shine of exertion, though he has not moved. His beard is streaked with grey and oil, his eyes small and quick, flicking across your face with the sharpness of a man who no longer expects to like what he sees. This is your king, Henry Tudor, Henry VIII, defender of the faith, breaker of churches, husband to too many, and now, it seems, patient to one more physician than he'd prefer. You bow, not too deeply. You were warned. His back aches and deep bows remind him of spines that still bend. You murmur the proper Latin, smooth and steady, keeping your voice low enough to soothe, but loud enough to be heard. The words are ancient, blessed by medical tradition and academic inaccessibility. He waves a hand mid-phrase, already bored. "Spare me the incantations," he says, and his voice is deeper than expected, rich but brittle, like old wine poured into a cracked cup. "You've come to prod the leg, yes. Get on with it." Before you can respond, he shifts in his seat with a grunt. The effort makes his face flush a deeper red. One of the attendants, a pale man with shaking hands and too many rings, steps forward with a perfumed cloth and begins fanning gently near the king's shoulder. Another approaches with a small copper basin and a folded cloth. The smell, you realise, is not coming from the room. It is coming from him. Henry offers a tight, humourless smile. "You'll find it displeasing. Most do." You nod with practised calm and take a step forward. A second attendant lifts the hem of the king's robe. There is a pause, as if the air itself draws back, and then you see it. The leg. No artist ever painted this. No tapestry dared to weave it. It is a mass of inflamed flesh wrapped in silk bandages, some of them soaked through to a dark, almost black red. The fabric is damp, the smell sharp and acidic, with an undertone of something sweet and fungal, like rotting fruit left in the sun too long. The ulcer dominates the lower calf, angry and wet, edges curled like the lips of a mouth mid-scream. A thin layer of yellowish discharge glistens beneath the folds, as if the leg is sweating independently of the body. You fight the instinct to recoil. The attendants are watching. The king is watching. The flies are watching too. 3 of them circle the exposed wound in slow, lazy spirals until an attendant waves a tasseled fan at them, displacing the stink rather than removing it. You drop to one knee, and the floor is colder than you expected. You do not touch him. Not yet. This is only the examination, the preliminary gesture, the silent contract. To touch a king is a privilege. To treat one is a risk. First you must observe, and praise and lie. You draw a breath through your mouth and begin your assessment. The ulcer is deep, perhaps an inch or more, the flesh around it red and glossy with inflammation. There's crusting at the edges and a strange translucent film at the centre. You've seen gangrene before. You've seen rot. But this is something that wants to remain. Not heal, not retreat, just persist. You glance up to meet the king's eyes and they are already waiting for yours. "Well," he says. The word is sharp, but there's something underneath it. Something tired, something afraid. You choose your tone carefully, soft and confident. The affliction bears the hallmarks of humoral disturbance, Your Majesty. An imbalance of choler, perhaps, with signs of moisture accumulation and stagnation of internal heat. He grunts. That's what the German said, right before he left. You nod, as if this confirms your theory. He may have been correct, but I suspect the timing of treatment was misaligned with the heavens. The astrologer in the corner makes a small approving noise. Henry doesn't react. He leans back slightly, his breathing shallow. You continue. Tomorrow, at the 2nd hour, Mars will be in retreat, a more favourable moment to begin proper intervention. Henry's gaze lingers on you, not quite trusting, but no longer hostile. We'll see if you last longer than the others. And with that he closes his eyes, not asleep, just done with you. You stand slowly. The leg is redressed by the attendants. You will treat it tomorrow, assuming you're still summoned. For now, you step back, bow again, and walk out of the room with the scent of infection still clinging to your nostrils. You have seen the wound. It has seen you. The first treatment is performed under the gaze of too many eyes. The king's privy chamber, though meant to be private, is rarely empty. There are attendants folding linens, scribes copying letters, and the occasional lord or bishop lurking nearby, pretending to examine a tapestry while clearly listening to every word you say. You set your tools out with ceremonial precision, arranging them on a cloth the colour of dried rose petals. Everything you do must appear deliberate. Even your hesitation is practiced. The bandages come away with a wet sound. The inner linen sticks to the wound, and you must soak it with vinegar and rose water before it peels free. The ulcer has deepened since yesterday, or perhaps it has merely grown more ambitious. The edges are now ringed in raw tissue, a pulpy halo of red and yellow, weeping steadily. Henry does not look. He stares at the far wall and mutters something about treason. You choose not to ask if he means the leg or the people standing around it. You begin with leeches, 3 of them plump and glossy, chosen for their appetite and temperament. You place them carefully near the outer rim of the infection, and within moments, they latch. The king winces and curses, and one of the courtiers makes a sound in their throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a gasp. You ignore it. The blood begins to rise, dark and sluggish. You whisper reassurances, as if you're tending a nervous stallion. It draws the poison, you say gently, though you're not sure what the poison is anymore. Perhaps the air itself. Next comes the roasted onion poultice, mashed to a paste and mixed with goose fat. You apply it with gloved hands, layering it gently over the broken skin. The heat makes the wound twitch, and Henry growls low in his throat. He's sweating now, despite the cold. An attendant wipes his brow. You glance at the astrologer in the corner, a thin man with sharp eyes and an unearned beard, and wait for his nod. The stars are favourable this hour, apparently. You're told not to lance anything unless Venus is in ascension. You are not told what happens if you do. You continue your work in silence. After the poultice comes a dusting of ground pearls, imported at great expense, and crushed into a fine powder that smells faintly of sea salt and vanity. You're told it was a favourite of his second queen. You try not to imagine what else she might have favoured. Henry shifts again, and the entire chamber holds its breath. His pain is sudden and bright. He shouts, then grimaces, then suddenly begins to weep. The tears come without warning. He does not sob. He simply leaks like the leg. You freeze, unsure if this is part of the performance or a private unravelling. An attendant moves forward to dab his cheek, but he waves the man off. He whispers something under his breath. You don't catch all of it, just fragments. Traitors, God's will, my own flesh. You murmur soft assurances, as if comforting a child or a saint. You tell him the treatment is working, that the signs are hopeful, that the humours are realigning. He nods once, then closes his eyes. Later, when the wound is redressed and the leeches returned to their jars, bloated and sluggish, like guests after a feast, you sit down to write your report. You describe the ulcer as responsive. You note a favourable turn in texture. You record that the king tolerated the treatment with royal fortitude. All of it is nonsense. The wound is no better. In fact, it's worse. But you know how reports travel through this court, how words become whispers, and whispers become rumours, and rumours become accusations. You choose your phrases like a man laying bricks over a grave. You deliver your notes to the Privy Council, whose members read them with the enthusiasm of men waiting for bad news to justify their suspicions. One asks whether the POS was saved. You assure him it was. A sealed vial, labelled and stored in the king's own apothecary, just in case it must be examined for divine omens or foreign poisons. Another counsellor asks if you've considered syphilis. You deflect the question by asking if he's seen the king's horoscope. You return to your chamber and scrub your hands until they bleed. The smell lingers beneath your nails. Your fingers tremble, but not from fatigue. You write in your private notes, the ones no one will read, that the wound is spreading, and the king's mind with it, that the sweat has turned sour, that he mutters names in his sleep and wakes in sudden fits of rage, that you fear the rot is not confined to the leg. Then you close the book and lock it in a drawer. The next morning the bandages are worse. The king is worse, but you say he looks stronger. You say the humours are settling. You lie to the court. You lie to your steward. You lie to yourself. The leg is no better. If anything, it has grown more assertive, more present. It dominates not only the king's body, but the court itself. People speak around it, not about it. Courtiers tiptoe past the privy chamber with forced cheer, noses discreetly tucked into perfumed gloves. Pages deliver correspondence with outstretched arms and averted eyes. You have seen men cross themselves when the bandages are unwrapped. You can't blame them. You've begun to do it yourself, in quieter moments. The smell is with you always now. It lives in your clothes, your hair, the fibres of your satchel. You catch it on your sleeves while eating, on your pillow when you lie down. It follows you like guilt. You burn vinegar-soaked rags in your chamber. You wash your hands until the skin flakes. Still, it clings. The servants who assist you no longer make eye contact. One asked to be reassigned to the kennels. Another fainted during a dressing. You reassured him it was just the heat, though there was no heat to speak of. The king is restless, or sullen, or shouting. His moods swing like an executioner's axe, slow to rise but devastating when they land. One day, he praises your steadiness, calling you a true servant of the crown. The next, he demands to know why you have not yet conjured a cure. You offer hopeful updates in the softest possible tone. You use words like progressing and responding. He narrows his eyes at those. He's heard them before, from men no longer present. You continue the rituals, more leeches, this time applied closer to the ulcer's centre. They detach too quickly, sluggish and unsatisfied. You try a poultice of roasted fig and crushed garlic. The astrologer warns you it's a bad sign to apply garlic under a waning moon. You do it anyway, quietly, when no one is looking. It makes no difference. The pus thickens. The wound pulses. It has become its own entity. A second heart, beating with wet insistence. You prepare ground amber mixed with powdered coral and apply it under a fresh wrapping of silk bandage, imported from Venice and blessed by a friar. You speak Latin over the application, just in case the ritual matters more than the ingredients. The king groans through gritted teeth. His face is wet, though whether from fever or fury, you can't tell. He smells of wine, meat, and something else. Something beneath all that, rising from the leg like steam from a bog. The court whispers, not about you, not yet, but about the king. They use euphemisms. They say his body is in rebellion, or that he is under spiritual strain. One bishop mutters to a lady in waiting that this may be divine punishment, a wound inflicted by heaven itself. The lady smiles and agrees. The bishop's robes are new. He has not served long. He will learn. You know what it is. It is sepsis. You do not write the word. You certainly do not speak it. Naming it would be treason, not in law perhaps, but in spirit. You would be accusing the king's body of failing him. You would be admitting that your treatments are only theatre. And if you do that, there will be no more need for your performance. Still you try. You request more herbs from the apothecary. You burn incense until the chamber swims. You ask the palace cook to prepare more boiled cabbage for His Majesty's supper, on the theory that something in the diet may be aggravating the imbalance of humours. The cook nods solemnly and says nothing. No one argues any more. They simply do what you ask and wait for the smell to recede. It doesn't. One evening, while changing the bandage, you notice a strip of dead flesh peeling away with the cloth. It comes off like wet bark from a drowned tree. Beneath it, the tissue is grey. Not the red or pink of healing, but the dull slate of surrender. You do not gasp, you do not speak. You simply cover it again and press your hands together, as if in prayer. Later that night, you open your notes and sketch what you saw. You try to remember what Galen said of necrosis. You flip through pages of diagrams, of saints with stigmata and martyrs with burning feet. You recall a lecture once, long ago, about amputation. The professor described it as a last resort, an act of mercy. You run your finger along the edge of your blade. You imagine saying it aloud. You imagine kneeling beside the king and explaining that his leg must be taken, that it has become an enemy, a corruption, that it is killing him. You picture his face. You remember the story of the Italian who once implied the same thing. He did not last a week. His chambers were sealed, his name erased from the staff records. Some say he took ill, others say he was sent away. A few claim he was found in the Thames, face down and headless. You close the journal. You do not suggest amputation. Not yet. You don't remember exactly what you said. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even unkind. Just a quiet remark to a courtier, a man with polished boots and wine-damp breath, who smiled too easily and leaned too close. You were tired. The dressing had taken longer than usual, and the smell had crept under your nails again. The ulcer had bled, then oozed, then done something else entirely that defied polite description. You needed a moment to be human, a breath, a complaint shared in the safety of proximity. You said the leg looked no better today. That's all. Perhaps you added, it resists progress. Perhaps you sighed a little too heavily. The courtier nodded, said nothing, then asked if you liked pheasant. The next morning the king glares at you. He doesn't shout. That would be easier. Instead, he watches you with the stillness of someone planning something. You feel it the moment you enter the chamber. His eyes follow your movements with slow precision, like a cat watching a trapped bird trying to pretend it's not trapped. His face is unreadable. but the silence is louder than any accusation. You murmur your greetings, you bow, you prepare the cloth and the basin and the herbs. He says nothing. You know you're already bleeding, just not where anyone can see it. That's how you learn about the second illness. The first is the leg, the second is the court. It is not made of flesh or blood, but it consumes all the same. It is composed of whispers, glances, invitations offered and withdrawn. Servants pause with just enough interest to be dangerous. Pages deliver messages laced with implication. Women in fine dresses watch you from behind fans that flutter like insects. The Duke of Norfolk nods too slowly when you pass him. You nod back. Always nod. Never speak unless spoken to. You've learned that much. You begin to monitor your tone more carefully. No more offhand remarks. No more shared exhaustion. The king is not simply a man in pain. He is a son, and every other body in the court is held in unstable orbit. Even you, especially you. You begin to speak of daily victories, of encouraging signs. You quote Pliny. You invent a new term, perpetua humoral tension, and insist it is a natural part of the healing process. You show charts with coloured circles that don't mean anything but look reassuring. It works, mostly. The Queen Catherine, still Queen for now, watches you during these presentations with polite amusement. Her eyes are too knowing. She asks gentle questions. Is he eating well? Does he sleep? Is there pain? You answer each with the skill of a man walking across a frozen pond. You flatter her gently. You compliment the scent of her gloves. You imply that her presence alone must aid in the king's recovery. She smiles. You don't believe it. You begin to fear the silence between words. Every conversation becomes a negotiation with the room. You learn who can be trusted not to repeat you, which is to say, no one. Even the walls seem eager to betray. You speak in safe phrases. You lie by omission. You craft your sentences with the care of a monk, illuminating a manuscript, not for beauty, but for survival. You avoid Cromwell, or whoever has replaced Cromwell this week. It's difficult to keep track. The names change often, but the stares remain the same. Always calculating, always assessing risk. You bow to everyone. You compliment their robes, their boots, their pet dogs. You pretend to forget nothing and to remember nothing that might be used against you. The court rewards this kind of selective amnesia. You start arriving early to the privy chamber. Not for the king, but to observe who else passes through, who lingers, who speaks in hushed tones. You notice patterns. The Bishop of Winchester always leaves before the Queen enters. The steward who delivers your herbs now folds the note inward instead of outward. A page once handed you a sealed letter and then refused to look at you again. You burned it unopened. That was the right decision, you think. In your quieter moments, you try to recall what it felt like to practice medicine, real medicine, when a patient might actually improve, when you could suggest a course of treatment based on symptoms, not court politics or lunar charts. You remember a boy with a fever once, years ago, who lived because you caught the sweat at just the right hour. You think of that boy often now, as you apply yet another layer of rosewater-soaked linen to a leg that smells worse every day. You become more careful with your own servants. You start locking your journals. You test your wine before drinking it. You stop speaking when anyone else enters the room. You notice how easily people start asking questions under the guise of curiosity. How is the king's appetite? Did His Majesty mention the swelling? Is it true he asked for confession last night? You answer with gentle vagueness. You pretend not to notice the hunger behind their eyes. And still, every morning, you wake with the same thought. Who told him? Because the king is still watching you, still weighing you. That one careless sentence, whispered in confidence to a man who smiled too easily, has taken root. You see it now in Henry's narrowed gaze, in the way his voice sharpens when he asks if you've changed the treatment, in the way he says, Your name too slowly. You've stopped sleeping deeply. You've stopped trusting food that arrives too warm. You've begun to wonder if silence can rot a body from the inside out. You're no longer just a physician. You are now a diplomat, a performer, a liar in clean gloves, and the king is still bleeding. The infection is no longer just in the leg. It has spread, not through the bloodstream, but through the air, the walls, the glances that last too long in the corridors. It's in the food, the sermons, the fabric of the king's voice when he speaks your name without meaning it kindly. The leg still weeps, yes, but now the rot leaks out of his mouth, his thoughts, his gaze. Henry has become a man at war with everything that moves and most things that don't. He has begun to question everything. The servants change weekly, sometimes daily. You pass a steward in the hall one evening and never see him again. No one explains, no one asks. The wine is tested more rigorously now, not by tasters but by bishops and astrologers. One declares that the king must avoid anything red until Jupiter leaves Scorpio. Another insists it's the salt that carries betrayal. You nod at both. You stir more water into everything. The king notices and accuses you of thinning his strength. He paces when he can, though pacing is generous. It's more of a lurching shuffle from one heavily reinforced chair to another. His face flushed, his breaths shallow and angry. He mutters as he moves, curses falling like ash behind him. Names mostly. Cromwell, Norfolk, Francis, the Pope, sometimes Anne, sometimes all of them in the same breath. He scowls at empty corners of the room. Once he threw a goblet at a tapestry. The goblet didn't break. The tapestry fell. Everyone in the room froze. You kept your head down and examined a chart that meant nothing. Charts have become very important lately. He demands them daily. Astrological renderings of his health, inked in gold and blue, filled with planetary alignments and invented phrases. You draft them at night with the help of the court's astronomer, who has grown increasingly pale and now refuses to use black ink, claiming it draws Saturn's eye. The king does not understand the diagrams, but he enjoys slamming his fist on them. Sometimes he laughs, sometimes he cries. Once he tried to burn one. It didn't catch. He also wants reports on urine, not his own, though you still provide those, labelled and gilded, in carefully selected golden piss pots that you polish yourself when no one is looking. But the urine of his enemies, of his wives, of his courtiers. You are not entirely sure whether these samples are real or simply symbolic. One morning, a young page arrives with a stoppered vial and says it's the Queen's. You do not ask how he came by it. You perform your duties with the solemnity of a high priest, swirling the fluid, sniffing discreetly, nodding. Balanced, you say, and everyone exhales. He demands answers but never wants the truth. The truth changes too often. One day, the leg is improving. The next, it's betraying him. One day, you are his faithful shadow. The next, you are too quiet. You've begun to recognise the warning signs, the slight twitch in his cheek, the tightening grip on the armrest, the smile that arrives too slowly. You read his moods better than you read books now. You've stopped writing in your private journal. There's nothing left to record that would not also condemn you. The paranoia comes in waves, and when it crests, everyone drowns. Doors are slammed, names are shouted, accusations fly like arrows, and they're just as fatal. He asks why the bishops pray so loudly. He asks why the Queen's hands are always cold. He asks why your hair looks darker than it did last week. You tell him the lighting has changed. You are not lying, but it wouldn't matter if you were. Truth is no longer currency here. Only loyalty and the appearance of it. One evening, as you remove the outer dressing and note the spreading discoloration, a blotch of purple now creeping toward the knee, Henry suddenly slams his fist on the table beside him. The sound makes everyone jump. You remain still. He doesn't look at you. He stares at the floor. "They've poisoned me," he says. The room freezes. You can hear someone's breath catch. A goblet clinks gently against a plate. You glance around the chamber without moving your head. No one dares speak. Which one, he continues. Is it Norfolk? That rat-faced friar? Howard? No one answers. Not even you. He looks at you now, his eyes bloodshot and searching. Or is it someone closer? He asks. His tone is not accusatory. It's worse, it's speculative. You bow your head and murmur, Majesty, no poison would dare linger in a body as sacred as yours. It's the correct answer. Or lucky. Either way, he snorts and looks away. The moment passes. A servant refills his goblet with trembling hands. You re-wrap the leg with extra layers and avoid looking at the spreading rot. Later that night, you examine your own reflection and wonder if you've begun to rot as well. He has not accused you, not yet. You are summoned at dawn, not by an attendant, but by a direct message from the king himself. The page delivers it with a face like carved stone and vanishes before you can ask any questions. You are not given time to eat or change your coat or prepare your thoughts. You gather your charts and your vials and your most diplomatic smile and walk into the chamber knowing something has shifted. The air is colder, the silence heavier. Henry's already seated when you arrive. His leg is not yet unwrapped. That's not why you've been called. Today is not about medicine. Today is about explanation, which, in this court, is a much more dangerous craft. He gestures for you to speak before you can even kneel. It bleeds, he says flatly. Still, after your powders and potions, after your prayers, after your damned stars, it bleeds. There is no anger in his voice. That would almost be preferable. It's the calm that unnerves you. The quiet, reasonable tone of a man preparing to revise the world in his favour, regardless of facts. You bow low and begin with the only thing that might save you, reverence. Majesty, you begin, voice level, hands carefully empty. I believe we are witnessing something not of failure, but of endurance. The body resists not because it is weak, but because it's chosen. He raises an eyebrow. He does not tell you to stop. You continue, finding the rhythm as you go. The wound remains open, not for lack of healing, but because it serves a higher purpose. The leg, as a vessel of your Majesty's strength, bears the burden of divine affliction, not as punishment, but as a test like Job or St. Edmund. He nods slightly. You're not sure if it's agreement or indigestion, but it's enough to press forward. There are those, you say cautiously, who might call such symptoms signs of disease, vulgar minds who know nothing of royal physiology. But I believe, as I have written here, you produce a scroll, freshly inked, filled with invented terms and circles of stars, that this is a manifestation of sacred retention. The excess of choler is not expelled because the body refuses to relinquish its divine fire. You pause for breath. You're speaking nonsense, but it's beautiful nonsense, poetic, comforting, the kind of nonsense kings like best. The astrologer clears his throat approvingly. A good sign. The Queen's chaplain, seated near the wall, frowns slightly, but says nothing. No one wants to be the first to disagree, especially not now. Henry narrows his eyes and leans forward. So it bleeds because it must? You bow your head. Yes, Majesty. The wound is anointed not by oil, but by providence. It bleeds because you carry more than most men. Your body strains not under illness, but under destiny. He sits back thoughtful. The room does not breathe, and then slowly he chuckles. Not a deep laugh, but a dry, papery sound, like old parchment being crumpled. You're clever, he says. Too clever, maybe, but I like a man who knows how to dress a truth properly. You laugh softly with him. Not too much, just enough to suggest relief, not triumph. You present your recommendations next. A new poultice, of course. This time made from honey, crushed rose petals, and holy oil from a monastery near Canterbury. You mention it was used in the healing of St. Thomas Becket, though that was a sword wound, and it killed him. You do not mention that part. You suggest applying powdered rubies for their strength, their nobility, a symbol of kingship ground into medicine. He likes the symbolism. You suspect he also likes the expense. You offer relic dust as well, the powdered bone of a minor saint mixed into salve. There's a vial in your satchel. It's mostly chalk, but no one will test it. He accepts all of it with a gracious nod. You are dismissed with a smile and a wave, but you do not feel safe. You've pleased him. You've spun the wound into a miracle, dressed decay in the robes of providence, but you've also marked yourself. There's no turning back now. You've told the court and yourself that the bleeding must continue, that it serves a purpose. If the wound closes, it disproves you. If it worsens, it condemns you. You've built a story you can't escape. The astrologer slaps you on the back as you exit the chamber. Well said, he murmurs. Elegant even. You nod politely. You do not meet his eyes, because you know what he knows. You've just traded medicine for myth, and in doing so, you've made the wound holy. And now, if it kills the king, it kills you too. She is not the first queen to greet you this way, and she will not be the last. You've stopped keeping track. Their names change, their faces blur, but the gaze remains the same. Steady, cool, assessing. Queens do not blink. They do not look away. They observe you like one might observe a strange mould on a familiar wall. Unpleasant, but difficult to ignore, especially if it's spreading. Today, it's Catherine, you think. Catherine Howard, the fifth instalment in a performance that increasingly feels like a tragedy, without an audience. She's young, unnervingly so. Her skin is pale and untouched by hardship, at least on the surface, though her eyes are older than the rest of her face. You wonder, not for the first time, if being chosen by the king accelerates aging in some cruel, invisible way. You've been called not to treat her. She's not ill, not yet, but to check on her general health, a routine courtesy, nothing more. Except nothing in this court is routine, and nothing is ever just what it claims to be. You arrive with your instruments, your measured tone, your quiet hands. She greets you politely, offers you a seat you're too cautious to take, and gestures for you to begin. You ask the usual questions: appetite, sleep, monthly rhythms. She answers each with vague precision, as though reading from a script she memorized last night. Her voice is soft, but not weak. She does not tremble. She does not fidget. She watches. That's what you notice most, the watching. She never stops. Even when she tilts her head, even when she glances at the fire, you feel her attention returning to you in waves. She watches your face, your hands, your pauses. She watches the places where you say too much and where you say too little. The examination ends quickly, because it was never really about her. "You look tired, doctor," she says, and it's not a question. You smile, not too wide, and bow your head. The court is demanding, Your Majesty. She nods once slowly. Her fingers rest lightly on the arm of her chair, the way a falcon might perch on a glove. His Majesty has spoken well of you. It's a strange thing to hear. You're not sure if it's a kindness or a warning. You reply with another practiced nod. I am honoured to serve. Silence settles for a moment, not uncomfortable, but heavy. Then she speaks again, voice softer now. He still suffers. The question is simple. The implications are not. You choose your words carefully. The wound remains, but his spirit is strong. It's the same answer you've given to bishops, to nobles, to councillors pretending not to panic. But when you say it here, in this quiet room with this quiet queen, you feel it ring hollow. She hears it too. Her mouth twitches, not a smile, not quite, something colder. She leans forward just slightly. Do you think it will kill him? The question is a knife in silk. You're not meant to answer it honestly. You're not meant to pretend you didn't hear it either. You clear your throat just once. His Majesty is watched over by God and guarded by every science we know. She leans back. The moment passes, but not without leaving something behind. You realise in that instant that she knows. Not everything, not the details, not the specific names of herbs or the latest failed poultice, but enough. She knows you're not telling the whole truth. She knows the wound is worse than you say. She knows the smell cannot be sweetened forever. And she is not surprised. None of them ever are. The queens always know. They know the court runs on lies and rot and selective memory. They know that power in this place is a fire that eats everyone, eventually. Some of them pity you for your part in it. Some do not. Some, like this one, are simply waiting for the next shift in fortune, the next swing of the axe. They are survivors, and they are very good at watching men drown while smiling gently from the shore. You remember Anne once, or perhaps it was Jane, offering you wine after a long night dressing the king's leg. You remember the look in her eyes when you declined. It wasn't surprise, it was recognition. You had learned your place. You are not their enemy. You are not their friend. You are a tool, a mask, a name in a report. Your existence is useful as long as the king breathes. After that, you become either an inconvenience or a witness. Neither survives long here. The queen stands. The audience is over. You gather your things. Your hands move automatically now. Pack the salves, check the buckles, secure the latch. You bow. She does not return it. Queens never do. "Thank you, doctor," she says, and her voice is perfectly neutral. You nod again, murmuring, "At your service, your majesty." She smiles, just once, just slightly, and you finally understand what she meant. She didn't mean thank you. She meant, I see you. It was a simple thing. A poultice, no more exotic than half the concoctions you've been smearing on the king's leg for months. Crushed wormwood, softened with rose oil, pressed into a linen wrap, steeped in warmed white wine. You'd used it before, on lesser men, with modest success. The ingredients were sound. The preparation was careful. The application was gentle. The mistake was the hour. You had meant to wait. Truly, the astrologer's charts had warned against treatments during the second quarter of the moon's descent. Too much moisture in the air, too much tension in the veins. Mars was low, Jupiter indifferent, but the king had groaned that morning with fresh pain, and the pus had turned a darker hue than usual. You knew the signs, you saw the need, and you acted. It took less than a day for the consequences to arrive. The swelling came first. The bandages, changed that evening, were soaked through, the flesh beneath hot and puffy. The usual sour scent had sharpened, edged now with something like rot left too long in a brass pan. The king's face twisted when you touched it, not with the wince you'd come to know, but with something more feral. He slapped your hand away. He stared at you with unblinking fury. "What did you put on it?" he demanded, already knowing the answer wasn't going to be satisfying. You listed the ingredients, calmly, respectfully. You omitted nothing. "And when?" His voice rose now, his breathing audible, his cheeks blotchy with red. You hesitated, only a second, but it was enough. The astrologer was standing near the hearth, pale and shaking. He didn't speak, didn't have to. The look on his face was enough. Henry turned to him like a hound catching a scent. "Was the hour favourable?" The astrologer blinked. You saw it then, the cold calculation behind his eyes. The distance he placed between himself and you, the line he was drawing. "No, Majesty," he said softly. "It was unstable." Henry exploded, not immediately, not like a thunderclap. It started as a hiss, a mutter, something between breath and oath. Then it built, roaring, slamming his fist against the arm of his chair, barking orders at no one in particular. He accused the stars, then the physicians, then the bishops, then God. Finally, inevitably, he settled on you. "Treason," he spat. "Treason by medicine? Treason with oils and herbs and foreign filth. You fell to your knees. You tried to explain. You said the pain had worsened, that you had meant only to ease it, that the stars had been shifting, that Mars had tilted unexpectedly. You were not lying, not entirely, but it didn't matter. The truth had already drowned beneath the panic. He ordered the guards to seize your documents, your charts, your scrolls, your personal notes, all of it gathered in shaking hands and carried away. One of the guards looked at you with something almost like pity. The other avoided your eyes entirely. You were not arrested, not then. That was worse. You were left in your chambers, alone with your silence and your sweat, and the echo of the king's voice still bouncing around your ribs. You sat on the edge of your bed for hours, hands folded, staring at the wall where a candle sputtered itself out. Every knock at the door made you flinch. Every footstep outside felt like the beginning of the end. You stopped undressing at night. What was the point? Food arrived, but no one spoke to you. The steward who delivered it refused to meet your gaze. The wine was watered, the meat cold. You forced yourself to eat it anyway, just in case it was your last meal. You wrote a letter to your sister and burned it immediately. You prayed, though you no longer believed it mattered. You reviewed every moment of the treatment in your mind, the weight of the poultice, the exact minute of application, the colour of the sky outside the window. You looked for proof of your innocence, as if guilt were something you could scrub out of the timeline with enough effort. You cursed the stars. You cursed your hands. You cursed the silence that followed. On the fourth day, a clerk came to your room and returned your satchel. It had been searched, but nothing removed. No one said why. No one explained what this meant. You nodded, accepted it, and tried not to collapse with relief. But you knew. You'd been marked. The king no longer trusted you. The court watched you more closely now. The astrologer avoided you in public, but spoke freely in rooms you couldn't enter. The ulcer had worsened, and so had your chances of redemption. You were not yet condemned, but you were no longer protected. You began sweating through your linens each night. You kept your boots by the bed, just in case you needed to run. You flinched when someone knocked, even if it was just the page boy bringing firewood. And though no one said it aloud, everyone knew what had happened. You had treated the king on the wrong day, and now the wound, like the court, would not forget. The first whisper reaches you through a servant, one of the quieter ones, the kind whose presence goes unnoticed until he's suddenly there, holding a tray or folding a robe. He doesn't look at you when he speaks. He merely says, "There's talk," and then disappears into the corridor like smoke. You don't ask what kind, you already know. The next day the talk becomes clearer. Another physician has arrived at court, a foreigner, Spanish or Italian. The details shift depending on who's speaking. He carries glass vials and speaks in grand gestures. He wears gloves, even indoors. You hear he's been seen near the Queen's chamber, near the kitchens, near the chapel, but most importantly, near the king. You tell yourself it's nothing. You are still the royal physician. You were summoned by decree, appointed by hand, trusted with the king's very flesh. But it's been 3 days since you last touched the wound. 4 since you were invited to speak in council. The king's chamberlain nods to you without pausing now. The steward who once opened every door for you now makes you wait in hallways that used to part like a sea. Then comes the alchemist. He arrives from the continent with a collection of tinctures that smell of vinegar and silver. He offers them freely, claiming they cure ulcers, tumours, melancholy, and, most impressively, political decay. One of his concoctions turns blue on contact with moisture. The king is fascinated. The astrologer calls it a sign. You call it a trick, but only in the safety of your own mind. No one asks your opinion anyway. A monk, long-bearded and wild-eyed, is next. He brings relics, dust from the bones of Saint Sebastian, a splinter from the true cross, holy ashes from a fire that once burned a heretic. He mixes them into honey and applies the paste to a wound on a nobleman's leg. The nobleman dies 3 days later, but the monk insists it was because his faith was weak. The king nods gravely at this explanation. You watch all of it unfold from just outside the circle. You are not forbidden from entering, but no one calls you forward either. Your name appears less frequently on schedules. Your chambers are still yours, but you begin to find things out of place. A missing quill, a misfiled chart, a basin moved half an inch to the left. Nothing overt, nothing that could be reported, but you feel the drift, the slow, soft push outward. Servants stop greeting you. Pages walk past without pausing. Even the dogs, like the little ones with trimmed ears and perpetual sneers, snarl when you approach now. You used to be offered bread in the kitchens. Now you take it yourself and pretend not to hear the silence that follows you out. You are still called in from time to time. The wound, of course, has not healed. It has changed shape again. The swelling moves, the colour darkens, the discharge congeals. The new treatments are no better than yours. But they are newer. And in this court, novelty carries weight. The king listens when the alchemist speaks, even if the words mean nothing. He hums when the monk prays. He waves your name away like a fly he's grown tired of swatting. At night, you pace your chamber and count the hours. You still keep a journal, though it's grown sparse. Your most recent entry is a single sentence. I am being replaced slowly, like a fading shadow. One evening, you are called to the council chamber, not by the king, but by the Lord Privy Seal, a man who once toasted your poultices and now avoids your eyes. He does not sit. He says, His Majesty is displeased. You wait for the rest. It doesn't come. You ask quietly, with the wound. The reply is a pause long enough to curdle milk. Then, in general. You nod because what else is there to do? No one says the word dismissal. No one needs to. It's not done all at once. Not with men like you. You won't be marched out. You won't be declared a traitor. They'll just stop asking you to appear. Your name will drift to the bottom of the lists. You'll find your appointments rescheduled, your access revoked. And eventually, your chambers will be reassigned to someone younger, or foreign, or louder. Someone with a fresh vial and a new story about the stars. You return to your rooms and take inventory. Your tools are still sharp, your books still intact, but your hands feel heavier than they did a month ago. You sleep in your clothes now, just in case. You dream of corridors without doors. The wound still bleeds. You still breathe, but only one of those is optional now. It's nearly dusk when the summons arrives. The page who brings it is unfamiliar. Too young to have been trained in discretion. Too nervous to hide the tremble in his voice. His Majesty requests your presence, he says, then adds, immediately, as if you might have forgotten what that word means in this place. You nod without speaking. You don't ask why. There's only one reason they call you now. You wash your hands slowly, as if the ritual might lend you composure. The basin water is cold, but you let it soak into your skin. The air outside your chamber is quiet, unnaturally so, like the hush before a storm or a closing vault. You gather your things with practiced movements, linen, vinegar, balm that hasn't worked in months, the instruments you no longer trust. You tie the satchel shut and walk toward the chamber, as if toward a grave. The guards outside the king's door don't meet your eyes. They step aside in silence, and you know they've been told. Everyone has. Inside, the light is dim. A fire smoulders in the hearth, its heat insufficient against the chill creeping in through the stone. The curtains are drawn. The air is still and heavy, thick with the scent of damp wool, overripe fruit, and something deeper beneath it. That same rank sweetness you've known for months, now more pungent than ever. Henry sits slouched in his chair. Not the throne. Just a chair, its arms worn smooth from years of gripping. He's wrapped in fur-lined robes that do little to disguise the bloating. His eyes are open, but unfocused. His hands rest on the arms of the chair like weights. When you bow, he doesn't speak. He doesn't even nod, but you know to begin. You set down your satchel and kneel beside the leg. The bandages are dark, stuck fast in patches, as though fused with the skin beneath. You wet them gently, loosening the worst of it. Careful not to tear. The stink rises at once, more violent than before. Your throat tightens. You swallow it down. The wound is worse, of course it is. The skin around it has turned a greyish hue, mottled and glossy. The ulcer itself yawns open, like a mouth that never learned how to close. It leaks onto the silk cushion beneath, staining it with dark, oily fluid. You dab and wipe and rewrap, though it no longer matters. The flesh no longer seems part of him, just an appendage that festers in defiance of logic and prayer. Still, you go through the motions. You clean the edges. You apply the balm. You whisper Latin under your breath. Not because it helps, but because silence would feel worse. Henry doesn't react. Not to the touch, not to the smell, not even to the pain, when your cloth presses too hard against a raw edge. His face is blank, eyes trained on the far wall, as if he's listening to something only he can hear. You steal a glance upward. He looks smaller now, deflated from within. The weight is still there, the mass of him, but the power has dimmed. You remember the man who once shouted oaths loud enough to shake rafters, who shattered goblets against walls, who spoke names like death sentences. That man is fading, like candle smoke in an open corridor. At last, you finish. The bandages are neat, the wound covered, the cushion changed. You wipe your hands and bow your head. Henry exhales through his nose, a long, tired sound. He doesn't look at you, doesn't speak, but his fingers flex once against the armrest, slow and deliberate, as if signalling something not meant for you. You do not expect praise, you do not want it. The silence is enough. You remain kneeling for a moment longer, then rise with stiff legs and aching knees. You whisper a prayer, not for healing, but for mercy. For you, for him, for everyone who has spent too long in this room pretending that something might change. He closes his eyes. You are not dismissed, but you know to go. The guards are already waiting outside. You gather your satchel. You pause at the door. You do not speak. There is nothing left to say. You leave the chamber, and the door closes behind you with a soft, final click. That is the last time you see the king. You are not executed. That alone places you in rare company. In this court, survival is sometimes a greater feat than brilliance, and you've never been brilliant, only careful. That has always been your gift, knowing when to speak, when to bow, when to vanish. It is a gift that saves you now, though you would not call it salvation. No one knocks on your door in the night. No one drags you through the halls for judgment. Instead, they stop speaking your name. And that is almost worse, and at first it's subtle. Your meals arrive later than they used to. Your letters go unanswered. Your laundry is returned with someone else's initials stitched faintly into the hem. You are not formally dismissed. No one says the word, but you begin to notice things missing. A medical scroll you left on the lectern has been filed away under someone else's hand. The basin in your chamber has been replaced. Your name is still on the list of court physicians, but in a different place now, lower down, half an inch from the edge of the parchment. Eventually, the summonses stop altogether. Your chamber is cleared in your absence. You're not even told it's happening. You return one afternoon to find your possessions stacked neatly in a wooden trunk at the end of the hall, beside the broom closet. A page you don't recognize gestures vaguely when you ask who moved them. Orders, he says, and walks off before you can ask whose. You are not invited to the king's next audience. You hear about it from a cook, who heard it from a steward, who heard it from someone who was actually in the room. A new man has arrived. A physician from France or perhaps the Netherlands. No one's quite sure. He carries a bag of glittering tools and speaks in proverbs. He smells of cloves and wears soft leather shoes that make no sound when he walks. The king reportedly smiled when he entered the chamber. He hasn't smiled in weeks. You are not consulted about this replacement. No one asks for your notes. No one requests your charts. The wound remains, of course, angry, wet, half-rotted, but the man treating it now is full of confidence and foreign vowels, and that is more valuable than experience. You see him once from across the courtyard. He is younger, cleaner, wearing a coat with buttons that haven't dulled. He waves at someone. He walks quickly. You don't know his name. The records list you as retired, not dismissed, not exiled, certainly not forgotten. Retired. A polite fiction. A final lie to tuck you away in the margins of history without upsetting anyone's breakfast. You move into smaller quarters on the edge of the palace grounds. Not because you've been told to, but because it's easier than watching someone else walk into your old rooms. The walls in your new chamber are thin. You hear things you're not meant to hear. Laughter sometimes. Crying more often. You keep your satchel packed, though there's nowhere to go. The pages still nod to you in passing, but with the awkward half-smiles of boys greeting an uncle they've been warned about. You continue your work in theory. You read. You mix balms in silence. You copy out fragments of old medical texts, just to keep your hand steady. But no one knocks. No one seeks your help. You are the physician of an empty room. The ulcer, of course, outlives you. Not literally, not yet, but its presence is still spoken of long after you've disappeared from the king's side. You hear whispers through the walls. The new man's treatments have changed. He's using silver thread now, or maybe beeswax. The leg has improved, slightly, or worsened. The stories vary. The truth doesn't matter anymore. One afternoon, while walking the outer gardens alone, you pass a pair of young courtiers deep in conversation. You catch only the end of a sentence. The last one, let it fester, followed by a laugh. You do not stop, you do not correct them. You are not part of the conversation anymore. You begin to forget details. The exact angle of the ulcer's spread. The sound Henry made when the pain caught him just behind the eyes. The feel of the bandages, warm and wet against your gloves. You thought these things would haunt you forever, but they fade. Memory makes room, even for rot. Some nights you think of writing it all down. An account, a defence, a confession maybe, but the ink stays dry. You've seen too many men ruin themselves trying to be remembered. Silence is safer. Silence is what kept you breathing. Years pass and the leg is still spoken of. Not by physicians, not in proper medical circles, but in the sideways language of courtiers, cooks and grooms. The word ulcer is never used. That would be vulgar. They call it the affliction, or the sovereign's burden, or simply the wound. A generation of pages learns to whisper it like a ghost story. They don't know what it looks like. They only know the smell that once clung to the corridors, and the curtains, and the linen no one wanted to wash. The king dies, of course. Everyone does. You are not there when it happens. You are not summoned to his deathbed. Your hands do not close his eyes. They say it was peaceful, though no one who truly knew him believes that. The body, when they prepare it for burial, is swollen beyond recognition. The leg has blackened. There is a rupture. The coffin is sealed quickly, and talk of embalming is abandoned altogether. They bury him beneath stone and titles. He goes to rest as Henry VIII, defender of the faith, supreme head of the Church of England, Lord of Ireland, King of France, still technically, though he never earned the title honestly. The tomb is grand as expected. The tapestries surrounding it are rich with lions and lilies. The prayers are long and full of Latin. The bishops speak of legacy. The courtiers weep with one eye open. The people nod and forget. But the wound does not die with him. It lingers. It becomes a symbol, as all things unhealed eventually do. Some say it was divine punishment, the price of arrogance, a mark of God's disapproval carved into royal flesh. Others say it was France, poisoned wine, foreign sorcery, a slow curse laid upon him during some forgotten parley. A few whisper, It was love, though no one agrees whose. Anne, perhaps, or Jane, or Mary, if you believe the Catholics. Each theory is more romantic than the last, each one further from the truth. You know what it was. It was rot. Simple, stubborn, unremarkable rot. A wound that refused to close because no one had the courage to cut it away. It festered in silence because the court demanded miracles, not medicine. It spread because the truth was too small to survive in a palace this large. You watched it for years, fed it ointments, disguised it in silk, wrote poetry in Latin to convince a man that it meant something more than what it was. But it was always just decay, and decay always wins. The new king inherits more than the crown. He inherits the memory of his father's wound. He is watched closely by physicians, bled more frequently, scrubbed more thoroughly. They wrap his feet in vinegar-soaked linen at the first sign of swelling. Every scratch is treated like prophecy. They speak of humours in hushed tones and pray to saints. They aren't entirely sure still exist. The wound has made them cautious. It has made them religious, it has made them afraid. Your name, of course, is never mentioned. The records list the names of those who served at the king's side until the end. Some of them didn't. A few of them had never touched the leg. One had never even met the king. But history, like infection, spreads in unpredictable ways. You are not remembered. You are not mourned. You are not blamed either, which is perhaps the greatest victory you could ask for. You live out your years quietly. Some days you tend to minor ailments in the countryside, aching joints, tooth abscesses, coughs that linger too long. You never speak of the king. When people ask if you are truly at court, you smile and change the subject. No one pushes. They assume your reluctance is modesty, or grief, or shame. You do not correct them. Sometimes on cold mornings, you remember the weight of the leg in your hands, the heat of the inflammation, the sound it made when you unwrapped the dressing too quickly. You remember the expression on Henry's face when the pain peaked, half fury, half fear. You wonder if he ever truly understood what was happening to him. You doubt it. He spent too long wrapped in titles to recognise something as honest as rot. But the court remembers, not you, but the wound. It is whispered about for decades. It seeps into legend. It finds its way into sermons, cautionary tales, jokes told over tankards. The ulcer becomes a metaphor, a parable, a national myth. The leg is blamed for decisions, defeats, even entire wars. The king's rage, the leg. His paranoia, the leg. His sixth wife, clearly the leg. And so the monarchy lives on, and the wound does too. That brings us to the end of tonight's slow unravelling, quiet, festering, and wrapped in silk. If you're still listening, thank you for enduring the rot, the ritual, and the weight of a crown that couldn't heal what it refused to name. History tends to glorify kings and forget the hands that tried to keep them alive. If you'd like early access to more slow-burning stories like this one, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other historical topics you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Amanda Lamkey. Sleep well.